let's move on to tonight. Months ago, long before this book was published, or while we were waiting for it to be finished, I had asked Greg Parker if he would come to our group and talk about this book as soon as it was released. It came out in July. Okay, before or after your birthday? Next year. Okay, then on his birthday, July 4th? Correct? Okay. And this is the book, and it's on sale out in the hallway if you'd like to have a copy of it. Well, tonight what we're going to do is have a kind of a sit-down discussion, conversation between Gregory Parker and the sage of Montgomery County, Little Sullivan. And Bill is going to ask you questions about the book, and they're going to kind of, you just have to listen and hear what all is in the book and hear about the book from the two of them. So I'd like to introduce Gregory Parker.
First question, why did you write this book?
Well, that's a fantastic question. Well, I will tell you, from actually being or sitting back and looking at the environment in which we have in today's political climate, it was really prudent upon me to look at that. And my son being in college led me, and some of the things he said to me were just wow. So I had to sit back and say, okay, it's something I need to write and to look at, especially in terms of issues like Islam, gun control, things to this effect that's in the book, and tell my son the truth. Not just what the liberal establishment will say is there or what they believe to be the truth, but what is the truth. And I wanted to leave my son with that truth, and so that he can give it to his children, and they can give it to their children. That was really the impetus for the book.
How did Alan West come to write the foreword?
Well, that's a great question. I had known Alan before and had spoken with him, but it really came about because there was a friend of mine who knew someone that worked for him. And as we were talking about it, she said, you should really get Alan to do the foreword. And I said, well, he probably wouldn't even remotely consider it. I mean, I met him before, but he probably wouldn't even consider it. She said, no, you really got to ask him. So I called, we talked, and I asked him, and I broke it to him. And he said, yeah, sure. I'll write it. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And it was good to see. You can see from his comments that he really read the book, and he looked and saw what exactly I was trying to do, which was to leave not only, like I mentioned before, the truth to my son, but also the truth for everyone. Because he had mentioned in his foreword that this is something that I can give to my kids and leave to my kids. So I thought that was fantastic.
To read the foreword, you have to buy the book. Have others had anything to say about this book?
They have. We did have the book. I did have the book reviewed and not paid, mind you. So they didn't pay them, and they say what you want them to hear. No, these were by individuals who were not paid, but they actually likened the book on the order of Thomas Sowell, Frederick Hayek, things to that effect. So I was very blessed to see that the research that I did and all the thought that went into this book was recognized by these individuals, especially to be thought of in those terms of Thomas Sowell, a great thinker like that, a great conservative, as well as Frederick Hayek, the economist from those days. And and I don't even mind if Brian buys a book to give to his no, Brian, just kidding. You can get one right out there.
You better autograph it, right? You obviously wrote this book during the Obama presidency. How did this impact your writings, particularly as respects your son?
Okay. During the Obama presidency really brought to light a lot of these issues, especially those of the transgender community, of capitalism and socialism, and really brought a lot of these things to light. And since my son grew up in this era, it was really necessary and needed. And I say that because I get passionate It was really to the point where Obama really made me say, look, I really need to sit down and tell my son, look, that crap you're thinking over there in college is just that crap. And we need to make sure not only do you know the truth, but that we continue along those lines. And now it's interesting enough, he's writing now. He published his first thing, which I was very proud of him with, about, I have to remember. Going to college, yeah, and getting his dream job right out of college. But the fact that he's writing and he understands, and I was with him one time, me and my wife were with him one time, up there in Maine. He went to University of New England in Maine. And we're up there, and he says, Dad, you know, I really, really think this global warming stuff is real. Oh my God, really? Now, you know, I wrote a book on the myth of global warming, and you really want to tell me, by the way, this is my second book, and you really want to tell me that you actually believe this crap. So we had a nice long discussion, and needless to say, after that, and after me showing him the clear examples of where they falsified data and other things to that effect, he clearly got in his head that it's not real. But the point I'm trying to make is the Obama presidency brought a lot of these issues to light where we need to, us as conservatives, need to stand up and say, this stuff is wrong, and the truth is the truth, because a lot of these issues are based on postmodernism. I'll get into that, I'm sure. We'll probably have a good question.
Explain the importance of the relationship between the Second Amendment and the black community.
Okay, that's a very good question too. As I state in my book, as early as I think it's 1617 or 1609, there were, Virginia actually created, there were laws that free blacks and slaves could not own firearms. They could not do it. And if you go through slavery, as well as coming up into, especially through slavery, they could not own firearms. Well, and now as you have, back in the 60s, 1965 or so, even Martin Luther King could not own, or could not get a permit to carry his firearm even after his house was bombed. The Democrats have continued, and liberals have continued to use the gun control debate to actually stifle ownership of firearms by the black community. Let's look in terms of today. Well, let's go back. They used high prices to get gun permits, things to that effect. They upped those prices. They also had what we call may permit, not shall permit, but may permit laws, meaning the sheriff's departments and police departments could determine who they wanted to have firearms permits to carry their firearms. That's why Martin Luther King could not get his, because they didn't think he was worthy to carry a firearm. With that said, if we look at today's climate, and I have this in the book, the liberal states are still may permit. They still allow the sheriffs as well as police departments to determine who is worthy to have a gun permit. With that said, California is one of the notorious ones. Of course, it's liberal, and it only has issued maybe 1 or 2% to blacks, as well as in Chicago. In the high crime rate area of Chicago, my research shows that out of 117,000 people within that area, only 193 permits.
Oh my goodness.
And those were issued to 80% white. So with that said, now in the suburbs around those areas, you have those suburbs which are about 96% white. They have astronomical rates of gun ownership as well as permit holders. So we can see that liberals continue to use this to their advantage to keep or to discriminate against blacks. Also, since blacks tend to be or minorities tend to be usually poorer side, the cost of getting a permit in Illinois is $600. $600. And you can only do the firing portion at an approved firing range. There are no approved firing ranges in Chicago. So they make it almost impossible to get one, and then want to claim that, oh no, we're just fine. So this is another liberal hypocrisy that goes on.
Well, the Democrats did invent the poll tax So we
And the
shouldn't
KKK.
we shouldn't be surprised about the permits. The other thing that's interesting about that, I would expect the area where there's the least Second Amendment rights are the areas of the highest crime.
That is correct. You would think that would be the case, and you'd think they would want to go out and get one, but again, it's tough to get one now.
All right, is the Black Lives Matters movement becoming a form of resegregation of the black community from society?
Man, you read the book, huh? Okay. That is interesting, because let me say straight off the bat, Black Lives Matter is a joke. I'll say that straight off the bat. It has nothing to do with black lives. But with that said, let me explain Black Lives Matter first, and then you will see how it creates resegregation. Black Lives Matter is nothing more really than a socialist tool, and they've used this to push an agenda of which they do not believe. They say Black Lives Matter, but it doesn't, because it was created by, I think, 4 individuals, 3 feminists and 1 transgender male, because that's actually a woman. And their whole goal, even on their own website and their own propaganda, they tell you their goal is to promote the non-patriarchal, cisgender view of family, which means to not have a family that's male, female, and children. That's pretty much it. But we all know, and I said in my book, that the problem with the black community is that the family has broken down. You know, the family is a breakdown of the actual true family. In 1865, during the slavery times, where actually blacks being married was in some states illegal, 63% of children grew up with a mother and a father in a black household. But yet, in today's society, 63% of the children born are born to single moms. The family structure has decayed that much. And Black Lives Matter is not about creating or restoring the black lives, because they believe in abortion, which is killing an enormous amount of black kids. They believe their whole belief is that there are police killing blacks, which is the issue. It's not. That's just a fallacy. Police kill more whites than they do blacks. The key here is blacks are killing more blacks. So they're not concerned about black lives. They're more concerned about pushing a transgender agenda and breaking and tearing down the family. Now, how does that translate? Because they're actually looking at creating safe spaces or safe spaces as well as resegregation. They would prefer to have the blacks only shingles still out there, because they want blacks only graduations, I think was at Harvard. They've actually had safe spaces for blacks where it's black only and no one else can be allowed. They truly believe that segregation brings about diversity. What kind of, that makes no sense. Segregation does not bring about diversity in one bit. So they actually are promoting that of which you speak, which is resegregation. And it's disheartening to see, because I remember talking to my grandmother and my mom, who grew up in the 60s, that was a turbulent time. And to try to go back to where it's blacks only or pushing white people out and things to that effect, it's just ridiculous. And my book goes into great detail in showing and talking about that issue.
If in a capitalist system, the most talented and best connected thrive, well, not the most talented, but the best connected in Montgomery County. Anyway, doesn't this leave more people behind?
Okay, and I would venture to say no. And I say that because I've got a classic example, but that first of all is based on the fallacy of the zero sum, the economic fallacy of the zero sum, because that whole thought process is that when someone gets rich, he's stealing or taking from the poor, and that's just not the case. It's not that way. It's a whole pie. It's not just one limited pie. If I'm rich, that means I'm taking from them, and that's not the case. I'll give you a classic example. In 1978, China was a socialist dictatorship, by communism. And if you read my book, you'll see communism is just socialism practiced at a high level. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, in 1978, China had 85% of their people living in poverty. 85% lived on less than $1.90 a day. 85%. Now, as of 2016, China has, because of the free market applications and free market ideas they put into place within their economic system, they have 1.85% poverty rate. They've reduced it that much. And there are plenty of people in China that are very, very rich, but they've raised up the standard, so now everybody raised. It wasn't just a select few, it was everybody. And if you look at another example in terms of North Korea, and this is in the book too, North Korea and South Korea, how North Korea, how when they were split, one took the socialist dictatorship and one took the actual democracy and capitalist road. Notice that North Korea has a $17 billion GDP and declining. It barely feeds its people. But South Korea has a $1.8 trillion economy. It's property rights and several other things. They've learned through capitalism. These are clear examples of how capitalism lifts everybody out. Another clear example of the destruction, look at Venezuela today. Look, Venezuela is, and it's in the book, I've laid it out. Venezuela is ridiculously, it's just downright ridiculous. The key here is to note that capitalism lifts everyone out of poverty. What I think has happened, and I note this in the book too, is that Americans see their idea of poor and say, oh my God, you know, he doesn't have a TV, he's poor. You know, based on the government standards and Pew Research as well as the Heritage Foundation's report, and I'm sorry if I'm going too long, but Heritage Foundation report is that poverty in America, when someone is poor, based on their limits, they have two TVs in the house, a car, they have air conditioning, the son has a Game Boy or whatever. That's poverty in America. Poverty everywhere else in the world, they're living off less than $1 a day. They don't even have food to eat. That is the kind of thing I think we really need to concentrate on, and that's why capitalism lifts everyone up and not just, and doesn't leave anybody behind.
If I'm concerned about the length of your answer, I'll tell you to write a book.
Okay. Work on the third now.
Speak to your thoughts on the transgender movement and the bathroom bill in Texas.
Okay.
And I want to know, you mentioned something before that the fourth person was a transgender male. What does that make them born as? I have no idea.
Okay. Well, when we talk about transgender and identity politics, we're going to have to get down to postmodernism, because this is really what a lot of it is based off of. Does everybody know what postmodernism is?
No, Jeff.
Dennis, okay. Postmodernism is a relativistic thought process that has no absolutes, meaning there are no truths and no absolutes. So if we look at the first stage of postmodernism, that was where academics and everyone really came into being with this, there is no truth. Everyone, you know, that's just your version of the truth. There's no real absolutes, and, you know, it's a gray area. Then the second stage of postmodernism said, okay, well, if there are no absolutes and no truth, then that means my view has to be equal to your view. My view, you know, my vision of Christianity has to be equal to your vision, or Allah, or whatever. They have to be equal. And now the third stage of postmodernism is where we get into where they've abandoned equality for the oppressor and the oppressed. Now, today's postmodernism is more, okay, if we don't agree, then you're oppressing me, and I'm the oppressed, and so therefore my views are now above yours, so shut up and sit down, and my views are now right. Or the victim mentality. That's where it is today. So, now if we look at the transgender movement, we can see this clearly, because if there are no absolutes and no truth, then there's no gender. Then if there's no gender, then a man can be a woman, and a woman can be a man, and I can be a 6-year-old kid. You ever heard about that? Yeah. I can be a 6-year-old girl. I can, you know, or I can be some baby living in a playpen or something. It's getting really ridiculous. Or I can be of another race. Or I can, you know, And all this stuff, because there's no definite absolutes. So,
Well, Greg, I identify as a black man.
all right, pound it down when you get out of here. So the thought process with the transgender movement is that the fact, since there's no absolutes, and transgender is really transgender, of course, we know is a lie and it's a deception. But the bathroom bill is actually trying to fix that problem. And the bathroom bill is not going to fix that problem, because the problem is really rooted in how they see themselves. It's their identity. It's the way they believe. So they will fight for that identity no matter what. And that's what we're fighting against. And I think it's important for us to really understand that. And I laid out in the book that how the fallacy of this transgenderism is really run amok. And I personally believe that society should not give in to these delusions. Now, at the beginning of the chapter, I laid out to my son exactly how I see this, and the impetus for this chapter, and what identity politics is. He's sitting beside one of his friends, and one of his friends is in a bulky overcoat with galoshes and boots, even though it's 100 degrees outside. And his friend tells him, hey, look, I'm freezing and I'm cold. You gotta help me out. What do? Do you decide, no, you know what? I'm going to believe his delusion, go get your bulky overcoat and galoshes too, and pretend that it's snowing outside, even though you're going to die of dehydration? Or do you say, you know what? You may need some medical attention and psychological attention, and let's get you that. So that's really what that's about with identity politics. I know it's an analogy, but it's indicative of what's going on. We should not give in to that nonsense. And I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. I'm supposed to be talking to you. But you understand my point by saying that.
How does your book translate into being a commissioner in Montgomery County?
Wow.
You don't have to have any training for that. See that right?
He lacks
Wow.
business plans.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Greg.
I'm not. Yeah, that's okay. You know what? I'm going to say this because Brian is here, so I'm not going to. I'm not in. I don't want to bash anybody or anything like that. It's not cool. So what I'm going to say is this. I think this book lays out who Greg is and lays out what I believe and what I think. And I think once you read the book or even understand what's in the book and how I see these issues from a conservative standpoint, then you see who I am and what I believe and what's in my heart. And how I believe serving people is the best. It's not about making money or having some exorbitant salary while I'm, the county commissioner or something like that. In Montgomery County, we were only paid $55,000. It was simply the will to serve. And the same reason why I wrote this book was simply the will to want to tell the truth. And I think that's what you'll see in this book. And you'll see how I see the issues from a conservative standpoint. Not necessarily, hey, I want to, be a commissioner or anything like that. It's really just to show who Greg is, what Greg believes, and what he's teaching to his son. And I think that's the most important thing.
I think that also gets magnified by the fact you wrote it for your son.
Yes.
And I think that's pretty important. So if you really want to know, buy the book. It's one of the things when you're doing an interview on the radio, if you've ever done it, you got to mention the book 3 times, something every 5 minutes. And finally, a softball.
Mm-hmm.
What music is on your iPhone?
Oh, okay. Wow. I have a great mix of music. I'm pretty diverse. I have country music, which is my favorite. My wife always laughs at me about that because she likes reggae music. I'm like, what are they saying? Anyway, country music, as well as pop, rock, rap, gangster rap. I've got just about everything on there that I like. I'm pretty diverse when it comes to that. I think it's important to make sure I understand and kind of see the whole picture, including in music, and kind of see everything.
Very good. Any other questions from the crowd?
What are the chapters in the book?
Okay.
Nice book.
I can't run the forward.
Right. Well, you can buy it, but the chapters in the book, the first one is Freedom and Democratic Socialism. I go into talking about what true freedom is and what democratic socialism is, and how they're dichotomy, and they can't really exist together, even though we do have it here in America. We have socialism right here in America. But the second chapter is identity politics, feelings over facts, and how those in identity
Just in case you forget.
I wouldn't forget that.
I
And how and how those individuals who believe in identity politics are really subjugating actually biology and facts, and are really more about their feelings rather than facts. Chapter 3. Yeah, you know what I did forget.
See, I got your back.
Capitalism and morality. Capitalism and morality is the third chapter. We go into talking about what is capitalism, what is morality, and does capitalism create poverty? Does capitalism create envy and strife? Does capitalism, what are the fallacies of capitalism? And that's what I talked about, the zero-sum fallacy. Chapter 4 is Second Amendment, and we talk about gun rights, gun ownership, how liberals have a collective view of the Second Amendment, which is contrary to really why it was written and how it was written. It's interesting how they take a collective view of the Second Amendment, but the First Amendment, they take an individual view. And the word people is still the same in both amendments, but that's kind of interesting. You can look at books to find that. And the fifth chapter is Islam and the liberal hypocrisy. We talk about how Islam is about the liberal hypocrisy behind Islam, how the factions fight each other, the two faces of Islam. There are two faces of Islam, if you haven't noticed, and I'll tell you them real quick. There are two faces of Islam. One, when it was created around 1610, Muhammad went to start out in Mecca. He preached, and he got about 150 followers. He spent 13 years there. Then he went to Medina, changed it to a jihad, and from then it just exploded. With that said, it became very violent and very, that's really the best word, very violent. And he took over a lot of territory. With that said, now the faces of Islam are, in today's society, would be the Medina approach, which is pretty much not it's aggressive, but it's not violent. But they tend to look at legislation, litigation, all those things to accomplish those means. You know, they're suing for equal rights to wear the hijab, and they want colleges to change their overall dress code so they can do this. They're fighting, but they're not doing it violently. And then, of course, you have the violent end, or the second phase, which is the Medina phase, which is the violent end, which is actually terrorism. So those are your two ends there, the chapters.
The also the trying to institute with their own community Sharia law as opposed to U.S. law, and say, well, this is in our community and we should do this. And I don't think you can let them walk away from that.
Agreed.
Other questions?
How many children did you say you have?
I have one.
You have one?
Yes.
So, and he went off to college.
Yes.
Where did he go?
University of New England
New England?
in Maine.
So I'm sure you as a parent, when he went to college and you saw him coming back with some of his thought beliefs, especially if you've written a book of global warming, your eyes probably lit up real big. You didn't realize, some of these things that these colleges are teaching children. And that's a big thing that's going on right now. And so that serves a lot of illustration for the purpose of this book, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
There is an indoctrination meal that goes on once they leave toward college. And surprisingly enough, Chicago instituted a policy that you cannot get a diploma unless you bring back a letter from a college, or a community college, a university, the military, or a trade school. You cannot get a diploma. Now, interesting to note, while they're doing that, because socialism, not only do they want to do central planning of the economy, but they want to plan your lives. They're doing that there. But interesting to note, notice how once you do graduate, if you do, they push you on to those indoctrination meals again to keep you into that system, to keep you indoctrinated. So it's kind of interesting to see that, and that's in chapter 1.
I think that's happened to lots of parents.
Adrian?
In Humboldt County,
Mhm.
is absolute real taxes go up or down if government grow or increase or decrease like the in-laws?
No, that's a very valid question. You know, that is, with that said, the real tax rate at twice we've had actually went down. I lowered tax, or actually us as a commissioner's court lowered taxes by actually about 5 cents at one point, and another cents another point. I think it's incumbent upon us to look at the entire scope of that. We needed sheriff's deputies, we needed to retain our sheriff's deputies, we need to have roads and bridges and things to that effect. So at some point, there was a need to have the money to pay for those things. And I think it's important for conservatives to look at that, because it doesn't mean we are not wanting those public safety needs. We need those things. So in answer to your question, those things were needed, and rate did have to go up slightly to cover those things. But with that said, it was still less than when I started. When I left, the tax rate was less than when I started. As well, as I mentioned before, we lowered the tax rate twice. I gave back as much as 5 cents at one point. So while there has been some need to pay for things, I think it was still a need to give back to the citizens, and that's what's important, that I did do that, to give back to the citizens. And also it's interesting too that our average tax rate while I was in office was 33 cents. The average tax rate here is 47 cents. 47. And mine was 33. So if we look at it in its totality, we can see that we can see that the commissioner's court that I was on and led the charge to actually keep and control spending as well as the tax rate.
That's because we pay salaries 3 times bigger than what you were making.
Yeah, oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, Diane Bass knows that.
2 issues.
Diane Bass knows that.
On the global warming, I have a grandson down in Huffman whose teacher taught global warming. And at the break after the class, he went to the teacher and said, "This is why we're in it. You know that's not true." She says, "Yeah, I know it's not true." And he said, "Well, then why did you teach it?" She said, "If I don't, I'll get fired." Now, the other issue is, as far as the budget, see, if Commissioner's Court would get paid the same as you did in your prior commission, we immediately have 20 more officers on the street.
Well, as you noticed, I advocate for reduction in salaries, because especially commissioner salaries. I don't have to me it's a call to serve. It's not a call to get rich or to stay there forever. That's not my goal. It's to fix problems and move forward. And so I don't need an exorbitant salary to do that, because my wife makes a lot of money. I'm just kidding.
I'm like, really?
Just kidding.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Questions?
I don't live in Montgomery County, but I do live in Liberty County, and I believe this is a problem for all of our counties throughout America, is the fact the deterioration of the family unit. I have noticed throughout Harris County and other counties that there's a lot spent on the prison systems and things, but there's not very much money spent on the court systems to help restore families be put back together so they wouldn't be a burden to the court system in the first place. And another thing I notice is that we have lost our shame as a nation to teach our kids to be honorable citizens and to be shameful when we do something that's not honorable, to be shameful and to try and restore the things that we messed up. That's one thing that's wrong with our prison system is in the Old Testament there never was a prison. They had restitution, but nobody has fear of having to pay nothing back. So we get more broken every day.
Okay. You don't mind me asking, is that just a statement, or do you want me to answer?
Or you can, just comment,
Okay,
and maybe if
okay.
you'd like to answer,
Okay.
some of your thoughts would be
All right.
nice.
Well, some of my thoughts, when I was a county commissioner, we put into place, me and the district clerk put into a place where there is a user fee that can be added on to a divorce. So it can actually help, and those funds raised from that would actually go to help reduce domestic violence and child abuse and things to that effect. That fee is actually being collected in Montgomery County. The question is, where is it going? I don't know. But it is being collected now. It's a $15 fee on each divorce. So, maybe we could, we did that specifically because when I started, there was a $500,000 line item to give to individuals in the county. Before I left, we got that down to less than 30,000. Because I believe that if that's the case, let the people who use the services pay for the services. And that's why that fee on divorce was there, so then they can actually, because in a divorce, you have the domestic violence situation and some things like that, so they can actually use that money to actually assist in those programs. And that way, it really gets off the back of the taxpayers, it's on the people who use it. So I think that may be prudent to find out where that's going. As opposed to your other comment, I'm gonna let that stand on your own.
I know some people here, like me, care about exactly where the money's going. So a two-part question. First, what does fiscal responsibility mean to you? And how do you plan on executing that if, in fact, you do take the commissioner's seat?
Okay, very good question. Fiscal responsibility means to me the ability to say no. And I know a lot of people say, well, what do you mean? And sometimes, and what I've learned not only through my commissioner, but city manager and other way, and even in my own life, you have to have the ability to say no. Son, not right now. We can get that maybe a little later, or we could save up for that. And I say that because I believe our commissioners may not have the ability to start telling some of these department heads no. They need to say, okay, look, enough's enough. Okay, yes, we have our priorities, pick them. We have a priority to more deputies and more shit, and that's fine. But some of these things, let's tell them no, hold off. No, fiscal responsibility. A budget is a document that lays out your priorities. Those priorities should be basic core functions of government first. After that, then it's just a want. So sometimes we got to tell the folks no. And I know JD's sitting here and everything, but you know what I'm saying? We got to start telling folks in these department heads no. It's just a fact. That's what fiscal responsibility means to me. Second, how do I plan to institute that? Well, we'd always say zero-based budgeting. That's nice and all. And as I looked at some of the things they've done this session, I think what we ought to do, and this is just off the top of my head. For some of those people who don't believe I can think off the top of my head, well, I've heard that. So I'm gonna lay this out. I think what we can do is look at that tax rate. Look at the effective tax rate, meaning what you would make, what it takes to make the same amount of money, go down 2 cents, and that's where we start. That amount of money we have then, let's look at that and go down department by department and justify what you need. And that's the amount of money you've got. Guess what? You give everybody a tax break and you've cut spending, just like that. Because guess what? We can tell people no. That's what I think fiscal responsibility means to me, and just an idea off the top of my head of how to fix that situation. All right. Awesome. Oh, John, I thought I was getting away. All right, John.
So Greg, you've come out against toll roads.
Yes.
State of Texas claims they have no money. Montgomery County claims they have all kind of money to build toll roads. If you're going off of Texas comment that they have no money to fund roads, how do you plan to fund these roads? What would be your solution?
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, it's not funny. I'm just thinking back as to a question y'all was asking me before when I was out walking and meeting folks. I know there's been some video around that'll state that, hey, let's just raise the gas tax. while there is one option, that may not be the best option. There are ways, because about 40% of the gas tax is funneled to different areas. So we need to make sure, one, that gets allocated properly. Two, we can always do what we did in Comal County. We actually, to stop the toll roads, because they came to us the same way. We want these toll roads in. What we did was actually loan TxDOT the money. And then when our road came up for building, they would give us that money back minus the interest. Stops the toll road, gets the road built now, and we get our money back. That's another way to solve the problem. So there's other ways to do this, but, you know, there's other ways to get this going. But in answer to your question, that's just two off the top of my head. Any other questions? Awesome.
Just a point, you can do great on these roads at $20 million a mile.
How did they come up with that number? I still don't know.
Or is it 22?
It's 22.
22 million a mile.
How did they come up with this
They're
number?
not service roads.
Well,
Service roads are already there.
because they're gonna have more toll booths, I guess. I don't know.
Numbers from the studies that they made.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. It does not cost $20 million a mile for that road. It doesn't.
Streets to go.
John Nix?
Oh.
Yes. Do you support open carry in a commissioner's court meeting?
Oh,
Come on,
you
man.
know what?
You can.
That's a very interesting question. And I really can't, you know, let's put it like this. I support open carry, period. But if it's a state law, I'm gonna follow the law. But my point is, I support open carry and concealed carry.
What about
I support constitutional carry.
State law gives the commissioners court to decide based on the Open Meetings Act, if they're going to allow it within their open meeting.
Okay, well then guess what? For me, I want it, because I carry wherever I go. Guaranteed. Hold on, let me get my wife, she has a question.
What about golden hammers? Do you support those?
Oh my God. You know, to me, when I was there when they said that, if you're scared of a hammer or if you're scared of the folks that come up to these meetings, then you probably don't need to be on commissioner's court. That's just ridiculous. You know, if you can come, if you come to the meeting with a golden hammer, or a slight hammer, or a ball peen hammer, or a sledgehammer, I don't care. Because if you swing at me, then you're liable to get shot. But it's okay.
I just was going to make a comment about the guns and I mean, you can sit in the gallery in the Texas Capitol with a gun in your purse or your pocket. So I'm like, why do they make it such a big deal to carry it to the...
Because they're scared of the people themselves.
They don't get paid that much.
I'm comfortable with myself, and I'm comfortable with the people that I want to help. I'm comfortable with my constituents, and I've got a pretty fast trigger finger, so it's all good. Yes, sir.
While we're on the topic of guns.
Okay.
Everyone's pro-law enforcement,
Mhm.
except the crooks, I guess. But one of the topics that's been debated quite a bit here in Montgomery County is, shall we say, the division of responsibilities between the sheriff's office and the constable's office.
Mhm.
So we'd like to get your thoughts on that and how you would approach that as county commissioner.
That is a good question. We actually didn't face as much division with that when I was commissioner, but I see how there's a lot of infighting maybe, and the division of responsibilities, because you know the constable, whether it was designed initially to just serve papers or things to that effect, and now they're really acting more like a subunit of the sheriff's department, or should the sheriff's department just suck them in underneath it and just let it go? I will tell you, I'm open to all those thoughts. I'm open to researching which way works best for this county and really moving forward with that. I'm open to eliminating departments. I don't think, and I will say this even right now, I don't think we need a budget officer. That's just another layer of government that we just don't need, because that's another, what, $300,000 I think that came up with. That's, you know, the commissioner's court handles the budget. That's what they're there for. We need them to do that, and really put a process in place by which they actually do that more effectively. Now, as opposed to sheriffs and constables, like I mentioned before, I'm open to all suggestions, and I'm open to researching that issue and making sure we do what's best for the people of Montgomery County.
What is your position like on light rail and public transportation?
Well, that's a very good question. Light rail and public transportation in and of itself if there's a bus system like, I think Conroe has a bus system or something to that effect. That's, you know, right, you know, that's, right, that's for those cities to determine what they want themselves. Light rail, when I was a county commissioner, we explored the issue, but decided against it because it wasn't feasible for us. It just wasn't. It wasn't feasible to do, it wasn't cost effective, so we decided that that's just something we don't want to do. We don't want to do. If the people of the county want mobility in that manner and want transportation in that manner, there's nothing wrong with researching it. But you know, I don't think Montgomery County wants it, nor do they care for it. So I will do what the citizens want. If they don't want it, I don't need to do it. We researched it. It wasn't viable or feasible, and that's the way I do things. I like to research. If it's not viable or feasible, I move along.
Yes, sir.
Who would you like to do the research? Because currently we pay millions and billions of dollars to have research done when most of it you can honestly Google yourself.
I like you.
I think, I will be honest with you, my friend, I think I'm a pretty good researcher. So I can do a lot of that myself. But I will tell you, and as this is on my website as well, I do believe we need to get away from this pay for play, where we've got these engineering firms, you know, giving donations to the commissioners, and then we turn around and give them a contract because we can't find anybody else to do it. That's really asinine, and we need to get away from that. I think we need to really pull that money back and beef up our county engineer, because guess what? The county engineer should be doing that. That's what he's paid for. He should be doing that work. So I think we really need to go about it at that route. And you know, Brian, if I hear you using this, man, I know where you got it. All right. Any other questions?
Last question.
He's writing his own book, right?
He's writing his own book? Okay, last question for my wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you writing a third book?
I am writing a third book. And that third book is called The Modern Plantation, and I'm writing that with my son, actually. And what we do is, what we're looking at is there's, Kenneth Stamp identified 5 items from the plantation when there were slaves and from the plantation, or the plantation. He listed 5 characteristics. Those 5 characteristics are very, very symptomatic and can be clearly identified within the ghettos run by the liberals today. Of course. So my book is actually laying out how those 5 characteristics of the plantation are actually synonymous today in the liberal-run ghettos of today's society. So thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to Brian's talk next week.